Thank you. So I pulled this because I have a couple of concerns. Let me just start with this. While there's a lot of literature out there that would suggest that having law enforcement on school campuses has its downside, I know it makes us more safe in one respect, but just to acknowledge that there's a difference of opinion that is actually supported with some degree of research. Having said that, I fully support our school police. I have been here long enough to see the evolution of our school police. Our school police are a specialty unit, right? And I used to say that they're not the slam them up against the wall and cuff them Johnny law enforcement officers. They're the ones who almost become part of the students, well, not even almost, oftentimes they're trusted adult, right? They oftentimes keep the campuses safe because of those relationships and because they become part of the school community as opposed to just law enforcement. And I've seen the progression, and I'm really, really, really pleased with the things that I've seen happen over time. Now, having said that, I do also understand the shortage nationally of law enforcement officers. I understand that. I understand that we are competing for law enforcement officers, and I understand that we want to keep our schools staffed. So having said that, I have a couple of questions and then a couple of suggestions. And at this moment in time, I'm still not certain if I'm going to support this recommendation. But, so Mr. Burke, I know that we had relationships with other law enforcement agencies and that they were helping to staff our schools. If you could just maybe give us a bit of update on where we are with other law enforcement agencies, and then I would request a follow-up in writing on who we have relationships with, when those contracts expire, how many officers we currently have, and what schools they're in. But now if you can just give us
So the board will recall, in the wake of the Stoneman Douglas tragedy, we contracted with several agencies throughout the county to shore up our security. And with the passage of the referendum, we aspired to double the size of our department. So we used those contracts, and we had a very successful recruiting campaign. We hired over 100 officers, and once we got kind of fully staffed, we backed off those agreements. They were always seen as kind of a temporary measure. This year, because of the national shortage, because of our recruitment efforts have not been as successful as of late, and we're working to remedy that and kind of revisiting our approach. But we have been contracting with about a half dozen agencies right now. The sheriff will actually be the 7th agency. We have agreements with West Palm Beach, Jupiter, Boynton, Delray, Boca Raton, and Palm Beach Gardens. So combined, they're going to provide us about 32 officers, with the sheriff now kicking in 20 of those 32. We have enough officers within Palm Beach County, our own force, to cover the schools, but we don't like getting this thin. We want to be prepared. Sometimes if we have a resignation or retirement, we want to have a little more depth. We want to double down on our recruitment efforts because we see this as a stopgap, short-term measure. We are committed to our department. I've talked to some of the officers. We're trying to, compensation is always important. In the past, we've looked at our officers' pay rate by the hour, and it compares. We're not at the top, but we're in the range. But I think the reality is we all see how expensive it is to live in Palm Beach County. Is the good and the bad of being a school police officer could be the schedule, right? Our hours are pretty predictable. We follow the school calendar, but it's basically a 10-month job where other agencies are 12-month jobs. And I can understand that if a young officer is trying to help support their family, that they may prefer to work 12 months because they want to make as much money as possible. So I think we need to look at that. And along with if there's any opportunities to redirect resources within school police to improve our compensation. But But yeah, so this, and also I want to just kind of maybe clear up one thing I've heard that's getting a little misconstrued. The rates that we pay either the sheriff or these other departments, that's not the rate that goes into their officer's pocket. That's the rate we pay the agency, and the agency then takes that rate and pays for the officer's benefits, the vehicle, their equipment, their training, their oversight and supervision. So it's not an ideal situation. We'd much prefer to have our own force fully staffed, and that's our goal, and that continues to be our goal, and we'll be working hard towards it.
Just one more now, then I'm sure my colleagues have questions or comments, and then I have some comments to follow. But so just to be clear, for each of these agencies, including the sheriff, it would be as needed over a certain period of time, and only in their jurisdiction. So West Palm Beach PD would only cover schools in West Palm Beach, for example.
Yes, absolutely. Each agency stays, including the sheriff, will stay within their jurisdiction.
Okay. I'll defer to my colleagues for now.
Ms. Brill, then Ms. Andrews.
Thank you. So I will support Mr. Burke's recommendation, but I don't believe it goes far enough. As some of my colleagues will remember, I twice formally asked that this board direct prior superintendents to explore a merger with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. Those requests failed. When Dr. Fenoy was here, I was prepared to informally bring up the conversation again, but I withdrew the request. I won't rehash the conversations. What I will say is that the world has changed since I joined this school board. I firmly believe that any concerns with the merger could be addressed in the contract with the sheriff. I also firmly believe that it would be to the district's benefit to move school safety to the sheriff and allow us to focus on our core mission of education. So I again support the agenda item SP1, but I regret it does not meet what I perceive to be our needs. Now, I do have some other concerns with the contract, but I understand from Mr. Burke that we are there are other things that are being worked on, but I will support him. But I do hope that one day this board will support my recommendation and move forward with the merger with the sheriff's office so that we can focus again on academics, on student achievement, and on education. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. I'd like to say that we are good with what we do within our school district. I do love the school district police. I was a teacher, a principal, and I know the value of what they do on the ground within our schools. But we are in a different day. Just this past year, I've worked a lot with the sheriff's office in Belglade, in Royal Palm Beach, and right now with the situation that we're dealing with the accident. The sheriff brings expertise that we don't have here with our offices within the school district. I've had a conversation with the sheriff. I know many of the sheriff offices myself because I'm on the ground with them in neighborhoods. And I know that when we come together with school police and the sheriff's office, there's just so far our school police can go where the sheriff can take it to another level. I'm worried about another Marjorie Stoneman Douglas event because I believe we've got to have everything in place. When I hear about surveys of people being disgruntled, I need to know the facts on that. I'm not interested in what somebody in the audience is saying, Mr. Burke. I want to know how our school police officers feel. If they feel that they don't have the equipment they need to keep us safe, I need to know that. I'm in a lot of schools, and I work with the sheriff's office a lot in District 6. That's all of our security measures for all of the cities. The villages in District 6 are run by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. So I do know them, and I know what we do with the school district. I'm going to support this, but I really want us to come back and look at the monies we're spending right here within the district administratively, as well as what we're paying our offices. I want to know exactly if we decide to go with the merger with the Sheriff's Office, how does that compare with what we're doing now, and what kind of services can we get? I think we're at a time to discuss this. Thank you, Mr. Barbieri, for saying that we will have some sessions about some things that we're concerned about. I'm concerned because I've been on the ground and I've saw some mistakes from our school district police office when we've had some real serious tragedies within District 6. So now my voice is different from the standpoint of listening to the sheriffs on the ground with me in crisis this year, just this year, and what we could have done differently as a school board and a school district police department to have made it better for some kid that may have had a tragedy. So we've got to do better. I want to know how much we're putting in overhead for administration. If we can eliminate some of that money and pay the people correctly for the school board, because most of these people will be still in office if we merge it with the sheriff's office. They're going to be hiring our people, and we're all doing the same kind of thing. I just noticed when I'm working with the sheriff's office on the ground, especially in Wellington and the Glades region and all over the place in District 6, I'm very comfortable with them working with our schools, because guess what? They're working on all the stuff that's happening within our school where people are getting arrested for doing these things that relate to mental health and the fights and the confusion. Much of that is actually farmed out to the sheriff's office when somebody goes to jail. So we've got to kind of put it all together and figure out where we are today. For my years of being here, I would say I would never, ever say that I would consider it, but yes, now I can, because I've been involved in some major situations this year where I was just thankful that I knew the sheriff's office officials who helped me through a lot of situations. So, yeah, we've got to make sure we get these 20 to get our schools in order, but we need to go back and reevaluate everything that we're doing. We've had a lot of different chiefs to come and go, and they've had their own idea of what that model looks like. We need to now look at what a model will look like for us pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now working out of a pandemic with mental health crisis everywhere, and what we need to be able to work together. And I just think the sheriff brings that law enforcement piece that we truly need right now more than ever before. I love the school police who brings that counseling piece, and they're going to still be with us, and we've got to merge it together so we can get the best benefit for our children. So I can support this, but I'm waiting to hear what we're going to do differently as we look at all of these children, many of them going through mental crisis, our adults going through mental crisis. Our police officers are frightened when you see things happening and they're acting the way they do, because they may feel that they can't even protect themselves. So I really want a situation where I know police feel comfortable. They're not upset because of some survey. They're saying they don't have the equipment. They don't have what they need to be able to do the job. They're not making the money to feed their families. All that needs to be cleaned up. I need to know that we're going to look at a model that's going to take care of our police officers. If we stay with the school district, if we're going with the sheriff, it needs to be something where everybody can feel like they're being respected and they can do the job, the number one job, to keep our children safe. So I'm going to support this, but I'm asking for additional information, additional meetings where we can look at all the money that's being spent, what the sheriff is asking for if we do this merger and go that route. I know this is extensive, Mr. Burke, and you told me you tried to work it down, those numbers, but we are where we are right now. And we've got to make sure everybody's safe. But I don't want any time to lapse before we have a discussion where we can look at all the monies from the sheriff's side of what he wants, what we're doing. And I want to know, how are our school board police, how are they doing? How are they doing mentally? When I'm hearing people saying that they're so upset and so confused about how they're being treated. If we have that going on in here, that needs to stop. And I'm willing to work on making that stop. Whether we do this tonight, I think we have to do it, but we need to make sure going for the future that we make some changes. And I think some changes have to be made. Mr. Burt, we've talked a little bit about it, and I'm really sad about a lot of things that's happening with our schools, with our children, with the mental health, with our police officers. They need counseling because of how they feel about what they're doing. So we all have to come together. The sheriff told me he's willing to work with you, Mr. Burke. That's what he said to me. Ms. Andrews, I'm not trying to take over school police, but he recognizes, and I recognize it now since I'm on the ground. I'm not sitting here reading a letter. I'm on the ground. And I see what the sheriff has done to help us, and I see what our school police officers are doing. So we've got to come together one way or the other to keep our children safe. And I'm willing to be on the front line to make sure that I can stand for that.
Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, I'd just like to share with the board, I'm committed to getting you accurate information, factual information, and we don't always get that from our speakers. We don't always get that from surveys that we didn't sanction. Tonight, I heard from 4 speakers from the city of Delray. There's some misinformation that was shared by them, and we'll follow up with that and, communicate and collaborate and get the facts on the table. I do want to say that upon becoming superintendent, Sheriff Bradshaw was very gracious, and he met with me and has been very supportive. He also shared with me that he did not have interest in taking over our police department, but he was willing to lend me his best advice with 50 years of experience in law enforcement, and I took it to heart. I think we enjoy a much improved relationship with the sheriff. I credit Chief McCutcheon as when he became our interim chief. He's got a good track record of being someone that's easy to work with. He had a career with the sheriff's office, and I think under his leadership, we've also seen much improved communication and collaboration. And our police department, we recognize our role as school police. We're not trying to be the sheriff. When there's serious crimes, or if there's a missing persons or what have you, or if there's an emergency, it's all hands on deck. We have a mutual aid agreement. All of the police departments across Palm Beach County are ready to come to our aid. So, we've heard enough things being battered around that, and we are scheduling a closed door session because it's security related and some of these items are sensitive. So I will work with the chief and Mr. Bogus. We will get the board all the facts and bring that to you in the immediate future.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you so much. I just want to take this moment to push back a little bit on some of the things my colleagues have said. I feel like I remember sitting in that room right there when Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened. We were all at a board meeting that day. Many people were here. And the things that were said after that was, thank God we have our own police, because our own police had done such a great job of protecting us, and I've watched them protect us. They have stopped so many things from happening within our schools because of the relationships that they have with our students. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't like PBSO. I have really been grateful because PBSO actually came into my town. When I first lived there, we had Lake Worth Beach Police, or Lake Worth Police at the time, and they moved on to PBSO. I think they're doing a fabulous job in Lake Worth. I'm glad to have them. I'm not unhappy that we're going to have this contract today. I think having this contract gives us that relationship with PBSO that I think is a very good place for us to be. We should be working with all our municipalities and our sheriff's office to create these great opportunities. I understand that our police have some concerns, definitely around salary, and I'm hearing what they're making at these other places. I want to be competitive with them as well. I want to recruit the best talent for our students. I want them to stay with us, and so we can protect our students to the best of our ability. But I believe right now that our police, having those relationships with those students, having people who will actually come and speak to them about if some issue's going on. I want the same officer to come to a school every day if that's possible. I know it's difficult with our staffing shortages, but right now when we have an officer who has a relationship with the principal, who's there and working with them, to me that's special. Like, that is a really good way for us to protect our students. So I would caution this board on moving this quickly or thinking about a full merger when we have this great opportunity to work with PBSO as well as all of the municipalities, having that partnership. Now, I understand we could possibly work on changing some of the ways that we spread out our services, and I'd be happy to be talking about that. But just a full-scale unloading of our police and taking on a new department, I'm not ready for that. I want to see what we can do to help with the morale in our police department first, and make sure that we respect what these officers have done for us over the years, because they have literally saved our children from incidents happening at our schools. And that cannot be looked at lightly. And I'm sure they did it with partnership with PBSO. I'm glad to have that partnership happening. But I'm not looking down on school district police, because I think what we have is very special. And I think the officers that come to work in schools are the kind of people that we honestly want working with our students, because they care about children. So I'm very glad that we still have this going on right now. I know we've gone through some leadership struggles in the last couple of years, but I think we can get that figured out. And I really want to start talking about what can we do for these officers that work for us to make that day, make this job the job that they imagined that it would be, because I think we can do that. I think it's just about us working on our leadership here. Thank you.
Mrs. McQuinn?
Thank you. First, I applaud our superintendent for reaching out to Sheriff Bradshaw. And Sheriff Bradshaw, I think it was the next day, he had one of, what do we call the therapy dogs at one of our terrible incidents that in a district this large we have on far too frequent a basis. And I appreciate that, because we are in the final analysis, we're one community. It's no secret that my experience as school-based administration has been very strong with our school police. But also, when I was an area superintendent in charge of the Glade schools, I had a great relationship with the officers with the sheriff's department. So you can still have those personal relationships. I mean, they knew what I was doing, and I knew what they were doing. So it's not a who's better than. I think, let's just really look at cooperating with each other, like Sheriff Bradshaw told Mr. Burke. I'm not interested in taking over your school police. I'm interested in working with you. And I can't remember if Mr. Burke pointed out that part of the cost of this contract has to do not just with salaries, but also with the equipment, the cars, did you do that? I just didn't pay attention? Okay. So I was probably thinking about what I wanted to say. So I don't see it as it has to be one way or the other. I do think soon that we should be looking at how our police department is organized. I don't think that Chief McCutcheon has had a lot of time to make that happen. He's had to hit the ground running in order to ensure safety and work on the morale in his department. So I want us to remember that we don't supervise school police. Our superintendent supervises school police. If we need something from the superintendent, let's let him know. I'd love to look at the money. He already knows how I feel about that, and I count on him to do that. I have one last thing to say about school police. What was the part? Okay, so it shouldn't be all or nothing, and we're better if we work together, and I'm going to remember that other piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McQuinn. Ms. Brew?
Thank you. So just real briefly, this isn't a discussion of a merger. We know that. But I want to clear up some misinformation. Mrs. Whitfield, you were here, I believe, when we had the full discussion. Had we merged with the sheriff's office, it wouldn't be a different officer in the school every day. It was going to be the same officers, and all that was going to change was going to be the color of their uniforms. So it really is not that, it's not the drastic change. Now, I did see the sheriff on Sunday night, and he does not have interest right now in a merger, because it's a couple times ago when I brought it up, they did work out what the savings would be to us. And there was a savings that we could get more protection for less money, but we would have to build certain things. I know there were concerns into the contract. At this juncture, he wants to work with us. He wants to help us. In our security meeting, we will hear about other areas that might potentially be together. But I will just end by saying that down the road, I truly believe that the merger would be our best option. I said that before, so that we can focus on our core mission. But I just wanted to clarify for everybody that if we ever do go down that path, it doesn't mean that our officers go away. It just means that their uniforms change color. Thank you.
Ms. McQuinn, you thought of the other thing before I call on Dr. Robinson. Go
Well,
ahead.
I did, and it had to do with what Mr. Burke said about non-sanctioned. This all began, this current controversy, over an anonymous letter. you certainly pay attention when something anonymous comes your way, but we don't take it as fact. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so this is not a conversation about the merger, but it is a conversation about the merger, huh? So I'm just going to put it out there and say my piece. So the first contract can say anything, and then they got you, right? So, oh, see? My phone throws itself at me when I tell the truth. Okay, and then, but we do have to make sure our school police have the equipment that they need. There's some long-standing issues that first this was going to fix it, that we just need to address it, right? What I don't like is a conversation that sounds like all law enforcement is the same, right? Now, there have been some times that I thought that we should have called the sheriff in earlier, okay? I'm going to say it that way. And I'm thankful that the sheriff responded when we did call. But I still see our school police officers as a specialty unit. So if I can compare it a bit to my primary occupation. So your primary care physician works with you to maintain your health. But if there's an emergency, they call on the emergency room physician, right? Now, that emergency room physician might not be as conversant with, all the health maintenance, disease prevention measures that your primary is. So they work in sync. And that's what I think we need to work out. Our school police officers, in my opinion, and I'm thankful to have seen the development of them as members of the school community that are known to be caring and help to prevent problems, right? Now, since we have this recommendation before us, I just need to talk a little bit about what kind of training we're going to put in place that, if I carry on with this comparison, would prepare the emergency room physician who has an MD, just like the primary care, okay, prepare that emergency room physician to do the primary care work. So in this case, we're taking PBSO officers who are working in a more high-intensity environment, and how do we make them become part of the school police culture, right? So my request is that, assuming this recommendation moves forward, that for all law enforcement that are not part of our school police, whether they're Sheriff, West Palm, or any of the other agencies you named, that we have them go through lifetime of consequences training, which I hope that we need to actually bring back for our school police, since we have so many new ones. And for those of you who don't know, this was a training that was put together by Dr. Angela Best and Judge Alvarez some years ago to get law enforcement and school administration to understand that when you criminalize a young person when it's not required by law, I'm going to say it that way, that there is a lifetime of consequences. It's not just teaching them a lesson, right? There's things that will hang on to them for the rest of their lives and negatively impact their lives. And so you may be doing much more harm than you thought you were doing. And I thought that training was very impactful. So if we're going to be taking officers that are used to dealing with, high intensity situations, right? So, I don't know. Let me just I need to throw this in. So you may have heard about a murder in a park 9 days ago. That was across the street from my house. Now, those officers that responded to that shooting, that intensity, that situation, I don't want them responding to a schoolyard fight. I don't want that reaction in the schools, right? All right? And so if you listen to me carefully, not discounting anybody's qualification. The emergency room physician has an MD just like I do, right? And so, but the point is to prepare people to react to a different situation. And so I would ask that we look at lifetime of consequences training, fair and impartial policing, as well as some specific training about de-escalation practices with young people. I'm not trained in that area. It's my observation that you de-escalate young people differently than adults. And so I would ask that we have a onboarding process, so to speak, for these officers, wherever they come from, Sheriff, West Palm, any place, right? In order to better fit in our school communities. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, Mr. Berg. As I said, I just came back from the Council of Great City Schools. One of the things they talked about, this is the 77th largest urban school districts across America. A piece of what they're putting in place now is a process where school districts can get information on how to work with chiefs of police, sheriff's offices, and so on. It's just beginning to come in place. If you can give them a call, because I think we're going to have those conversations of how it works as we transition. I love school police, but right now I'm talking about safety. I'm happy we're going to get the additional offices. I'm happy we're working with West Palm Beach and all these other municipalities, but I really want to know what's going to be the solution for the future, and I really will be very upset if we don't start having some real serious conversations about how we are keeping our children safe, and if we're doing everything that we can to do it with all the pieces of the puzzle. And certainly the morale is a big thing, and if people are frightened to speak to the board members or to others, something's wrong here. I go to a lot of schools, so we've got to figure out how we can continue working with the sheriff. He seems to like you, Mr. Burke. He said your meeting was great, so we just got to move on, but we've got to figure out where we're going. I want a few months from now for us to be able to talk about, is this what we want, or should we be somewhere else? And if it means a merger or whatever, we've got to be there. But I really want to know tomorrow, once we pass this tonight, and hopefully it's passed, that we're going to have every school covered and we're safe, and then to figure out the next steps of where we go.
Yes, I'm always happy to look at whatever the Council of Great City Schools puts out. They do a quality work. And then just again, I do feel like I have a good relationship with the sheriff. I reached out to the sheriff's office for these additional 20 officers. This was our doing. It would have been nice if the price was a little lower, but I didn't get everything I asked for, right? So even our great relationship has limits. But, you know, we do have a good relationship with the sheriff. You know, I have his cell phone number. I have reached out to him. We had a student go missing in Georgia. He put through his resources behind the search, and could not have been more responsive within minutes. And it's very nice to know we have that 24/7 access where the sheriff's office is willing to come to our support. And anyway, but yes, I will see what we've, you know, coming out of the pandemic, I think a lot of school districts have reevaluated their school police. Many districts don't have their own. Some districts started backing away from having officers in their schools altogether, you know, in the wake of the George Floyd murder. So things have played out over the last couple of years, so we always need to stay current with best practices. But, you know, having our own police force has been very beneficial, as we've heard here tonight, and we continue to support them.
All right, take a
And one more thing I just have to say. We have every school covered. This contract is to give us a little more depth on the bench. We would like to have more officers and have additional officers at, you know, schools that are larger, but we have not, you know, we continue to have an officer in schools every day.
All right, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.